This is Bob Andelman, and you're listening to and hopefully watching the Mr. Media interview with Stetson University law professor Roy Gardner, author of the new book Lawyers, Swamps, and Money. Roy, how did you get interested in wetlands and environmental law in the first place?
Because I worked in the Pentagon.
Well, sure, that would be the obvious reason for me.
A natural connection.
Yeah.
I was interested in the environment when I was growing up, but I didn't actually start working on environmental issues until I was in the Pentagon. I had a Army ROTC commitment from undergrad, and the Army was kind enough to let me go to law school. And after law school, I was picked up for a job in the Army General Counsel's office, and my job was to advise the Assistant Secretary of the Army who attempts to oversee the Corps of Engineers. And so that was my hook into the environmental world, was through the Corps of Engineers, since that agency, oddly enough, has a regulatory program.
And you talk in the book a little bit about the difference between the Corps and the government, and who does what, and how it all kind of fits together. Is it out of control? Does the government need to take another look at how all that works?
In terms of the Corps of Engineers, I mean, now I don't think so. I mean, historically, I think there was an issue with the Corps not understanding that it was part of the executive branch, and that it was the boss of the Corps of Engineers is actually the President of the United States, and that they did not work directly for Congress providing pork barrel projects. I think that I don't think there's as much of that anymore. I think there's more of a unified theme and program within the Corps of Engineers.
The Corps has been getting a lot of criticism of late. Again, as we're talking, it's a couple days ago they opened up the floodgates, so to speak, because of the Mississippi, and a lot of farmland. I don't know how many tens of thousands of acres of farmland perhaps being flooded to save the cities downstream. And there's been a lot. I was watching, I don't know, MSNBC, and there was a lot of criticism, I think, of the Corps for over the years going from a very reliable part of the government that made very smart decisions and did smart construction to basically a general contractor that gives out contracts for shoddy construction and levees that break and other types of things. I don't want to get too far afield here, but a lot of that seems to be environmental related. That's why I asked you if maybe there is some need to rein in what they do or better define what they do.
Well, I think in terms of the levees and actually breaching them intentionally now, I mean, those are difficult decisions to make, and I mean, I think they're doing the best they can with that. Historically, I would say that that they may have been very good at water resource projects such as dams, but that wasn't particularly good for the environment. So, for example, here in Florida, the Corps of Engineers channelized and straightened out the Kissimmee River, and after we realized that that probably wasn't a very good thing to do from an environmental perspective, then the Corps of Engineers said, we're America's environmental engineers, and it had a new job to restore the Kissimmee to its original meanderings.
I think there's what do they say, that the Corps had never met a body of water that it didn't want to dam up?
That's right. Yeah. That's right.
All right. And in terms of as a professor, what type of students are drawn to this corner of law? And I mean, in the first part, I said to you, quite honestly, it seemed like it must be a very frustrating specialization in the law, environmental, because it never seems like you get a clear victory. But so, what kind of student is drawn to this?
I think idealistic students are drawn to it. Students that want to do something for their community, whether locally, regionally, or nationally. It may be that they have a particular connection with nature. It's only after they get into it a little bit do they realize that environmental law is really not about animals, it's really about agencies. And so that's why they have to understand administrative law and how do you influence agencies, and how do you convince them to take a certain action, or how do you sue them if they take an action that you think is incorrect?
And that would be why Chapter 2, after the fun stuff, is administrative law. And I guess it's a test. You draw them in, right, with Chapter 1. I think we talked about this. All the pop culture stuff, the Swamp Thing, and Monty Python, and Hound of the Baskervilles, and it's all very fun. The X-Files. Chapter 2, you throw in administrative law at them in this book. And I guess if they can survive that, and if they can handle that, they're free to move on to the fun stuff again.
Exactly. Exactly. So I attempt to hook them with Chapter 1, we get a little serious in Chapter 2, and then more fun begins after that.
Got it. Now, you obviously, I know that you're here in Florida, you teach here in Florida. Is this kind of the nexus for all great environmental or wetlands law, or is there somewhere else that has a bigger impact nationally?
I think if you're going to be involved with wetland law, Florida's a fantastic place to be, just in terms of the amount of wetlands that we have here, but also some of the regulatory programs that we have, not only at the federal level with the Corps of Engineers, but at the state level as well. We have fairly developed rules with respect to wetland mitigation banking, and so the state is a leader in that particular industry.
Well, let me ask you this. I'm sorry. What are the major issues right now in Florida with regard to wetlands and mitigation and the whole shooting match?
Well, I think one of the issues with respect to wetlands is simply whether the regulatory agencies, whether it's federal or state, will actually deny permits for development projects to keep wetlands from being filled in the first place. And in down economic times, if there's a project that will give jobs, even if they're temporary jobs, there is an inclination, there is pressure on the government to sort of say, well, we're not going to worry so much about the environment right now. We're going to focus more on the short term, which I think is a mistake. So that's one area that we need to keep an eye on. The second area is when the government issues a permit and allows somebody to fill in a wetland, it's usually done based on this promise that they're going to provide mitigation. They're going to offset the impacts. Well, we need to keep an eye to make sure that they're actually doing that these restoration projects are actually taking place and providing the ecosystem services that they're supposed to be providing.
Okay. And then we talked about Florida, but I know, well, from knowing you, that you also do, I guess, some consulting overseas?
Well, it's I wouldn't describe it as consulting. It's more pro bono, but I work quite a bit with the Ramsar Convention, which is a treaty focusing on wetland conservation. So it is it's actually celebrating its 40th anniversary this year. The headquarters for the secretariat that oversees this treaty is in Switzerland, and I work quite a bit with their scientific and technical review panel. So it's a treaty that has 160 parties, including the United States. The U.S. signed up to it under the Reagan administration, as I like to point out.
That's
so wetlands protection, it's a bipartisan effort.
Of course it is. Of course it is. So that's the treaty that we still belong to. Okay, good to keep in mind.
Yes.
And then you also do some teaching in Spain each year, or almost every year, or every other year.
I try to. I've been fortunate. Stetson has a summer abroad program at the University of Granada, and we have some connections there. So I've taught in our program there, and I've also served as a visiting professor at the University of Granada, and so been very fortunate to spend some time there.
All right. Finally, last question: Is it naive to think that we all drink water, we all breathe the air, and that we all should be protecting our natural resources, or am I just, too much of a schoolboy in that regard?
You're very idealistic. You should come to Stetson and study environmental law.
That'd be the end of that school. Okay. Well, folks, listen. You can order Roy Gardner's new book, Lawyers, Swamps, and Money: U.S. Wetland Law, Policy, and Politics, on Amazon.com, or you can get it at a great price right now at MrMedia.com. Roy, I didn't even think to ask you this ahead. Do you have a website for the book, or are you Twitter, Facebook, any of that kind of college student stuff?
old school right now, Bob. I don't have that. Although I will consult with Meggie, my daughter, about setting up a Facebook page and a Twitter account.
I think we need to get you some social media going. I mean, you're doing environmental law. These kids are the ones that are ruling the world now on social media. We've got to get you on there.
That's a good point. That's a good point.
All right. Well, Roy Gardner, thank you so much for joining us on Mr. Media today. It was fun and nice to help out a friend, I hope.
Well, thanks so much. It's been a real pleasure.
My pleasure. And folks, for more original interviews with lawyers, politicians, and other swamp things, surf over to our main website, mrmedia.com, mrmedia.com. If you've enjoyed today's show, you can subscribe for free to Mr. Media via email, RSS, or iTunes, and you'll never miss a show. You can also listen with a piece of string and a tin can in many parts of the Florida Everglades. Show your support of Mr. Media by supporting our sponsors, including Audible. To download your free audiobook today, go to audibletrial.com/radio. Again, that's audibletrial.com/radio for your free audiobook. If you've got an idea for a guest, a comment on today's show, or would like to advertise on Mr. Media, email me directly at bob@mrmedia.com, mrmedia.com. You can also call our 24-hour listener line now at 1-727-498-4711, but be warned, some messages may be used on an upcoming show. You can also follow Mr. Media on Facebook, on Twitter, or our new YouTube video channel. Thanks so much for joining us today. Always appreciate you giving up a piece of your day and spending it with us. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Bye, everybody.